Everybody's here now, so we are going to start our roundtable. This is actually the 12th, Hye-Kyung, right? 12th?
13th, actually.
13, I'm sorry. 13. We did 12. Okay, the roundtable. This time is very important, it's going to be very important, very interesting, because AG 13 sessions of AG OEWGA, Openended Working Group and Asian. It is going to be about that, and we are having very, very important people, particularly the Margaret Young is the one who runs the GAROP, as well as the founder of the Age Knowble, based in Canada, which has grown tremendously during recent years. And she has been very precious resources for the AGAC from the beginning. She served as advisory group for our journal. What is it? Issue Focus. And also now she is the member of the Global Advisory Board member in these days. So, and also, yes, and also I do really appreciate for your impressive congratulatory remarks for the Korean Human Rights Forum for the older persons' right to the adequate housing, which was held in last March as a part of the your global rally 2023 global rally, the AG with Rights. I do appreciate for your very serious and sincere congratulatory remarks at that time. And I believe that we are all the time we are together with the GAROPs of all kinds of activities. And I think Margaret Young is the person who really do not need the introduction already. So famous. And for this roundtable, we have the person who really doesn't need the introduction, the authority in the field of research on the older persons' well-being and related social policies and activity practices, the Professor Hye-Kyung Lee, the Emeritus Professor of Seoul National University, the Department of Social Welfare. It's very much an honor to have him as advisory member of the AGAC, and his ceaseless, endless support for agencies for our center. And also we're very much honored to have Hyun-Se Cho, who is the president of Age International Korea. He is very much respected for his honest and high standard activities, not only in Korea but also in the Asian countries. He's an invaluable asset for the AGAC these days. Thank you very much. And now we have our pleasure, Song Hye-Young, on this roundtable. So we will start. I think Hye-Young had sent a letter. What is going to be talked about in this roundtable? So maybe we can start with the Margaret's write-up, which was sent to us. We have shared right in this morning. Thank you very much. And is there anything to add for the opening, Hye-Young?
Sorry?
No. So then why don't we go to the brief presentation of the Margaret.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be having this roundtable with yourselves. It's great to see Dr. Lee again, and of course, Hye-Kyung, who we always do great exchanges. Mr. Cho, good to see you again after, I think, a while ago, but still quite recent. And it's a pleasure to meet Dr. Choi today. So, yeah. So I think what I might help to do is maybe just set a little bit of context for my personal experience about the movement around human rights of older people. I think there's some interest in hearing more about the open-ended working group and the session that took place earlier this March. And maybe then we can chat a bit about what's to come, or what some of the activities and opportunities moving ahead, leading up to the Human Rights Council in September, as well as the open-ended working group next year in 2014. So I'll probably make the presentation a little bit shorter, because otherwise you probably get bored listening to me talk for too long, and I'd rather look forward to a dialogue with yourself. So just to set the context of it all, as Dr. Choi would know very well, that there's currently no international human rights instrument that promote and protect the rights of older people. We have that in our identity in terms of being a child, a woman, a person with disability, or a person who's facing racial discrimination, but it's actually nothing for older people today. So that's the starting point. OHCHR actually did a study first in 2012 and then in 2021 about this issue. And what OHCHR found and has reported is that the current international human rights instrument that exists, they do not have sufficient coverage about the aspects of older person and aging in later life. And the various mechanisms, like human rights system mechanisms such as treaty bodies, they do not consistently look at or examine the issues of human rights violations toward the older person. So in their report, in the OHCHR report, it recommended both times that a new instrument, a new international human rights instrument is needed in order to protect, promote the older person, and then to also ensure that in our various mechanisms that we do pay attention and focus on the needs of the human rights of older person. So that's kind of like a backdrop. So in knowing this, there are two UN places that currently support looking at these normative gap issues on human rights of older person. The first one is in New York. It's the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. And then the second one is actually the Human Rights Council, which we know does periodic reviews, and there are treaty bodies. So the topic of older persons come up there, from time to time. So with the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, it was established by the UN General Assembly in 2010. And it has the mandate of looking at existing international human rights instrument and then determining whether it's sufficient or not, and then to promote or to help consider whether or not anything additional is needed. So that's the mandate of the working group. And the working group has three key groups that kind of triangulate the discussion. The first is the member states, all our governments, 193 of them. The second is National Human Rights Institution. And the third is civil society, within which older persons, NGOs, as well as academia and other advocates are part of that process. So the process, how it works is that there were 14 topics that were identified relative to aging. And the idea is to look at within each of these topics, what are the policy that happens today? What are the substantive kind of issues? And then more importantly, what are the normative gaps? How do the current human rights laws within a country or within a region or internationally support the particular aging area? So, some of these areas, 14 areas, include things like access to health and health services, lifelong learning, social security, palliative care, so the list is quite long, right? As of the 2013 session this year, we have completed 12 topics, and there are 2 left in 2024 next year. So this is quite a pivotal moment, because if you think about, okay, the mandate is there, right, in terms of identifying gaps and looking at what to do next. And then we have all these topics that we're supposed to discuss and work on. We're down to 2 now, and next year is the last 2. What happens, right? So it's really a pivotal time, and we'll probably in our dialogue talk more about that. So that's the open-ended working group kind of structure and who the players are. So you might then kind of ask, okay, 13 years is a long time. So what has been happening? 13 years, right? So over the 13 years, I think I observed there are 3 key things. So, and I'll kind of once again do that triangulation of looking at the 3 parties. The first was civil society, which means older people, NGOs, academia. There's increasingly louder voices and vocal voices that we need to start drafting now. That's a clear message, be it, you know, we hear them in the day-to-day kind of advocacy at the national level or at OEWG. They're saying we need to start drafting now. And then what we need more in that part of the triangle is to have more voices of different older people populations, of different NGOs across countries and regions saying the same, so that we have a louder voice together. The second part of that triangulation is NHRIs. You know, the National Human Rights Institution play a very important role within our society. They are the protector of human rights. Even though they might be funded by a government, they are independent of the government. They really focus on human rights of older person. So they are very natural partners of NGOs and civil society, because NGO is the watchdog that's here and see what's happening and what the gaps are. And the 2 need to work together. What we've observed is that of recent, like there's increasing partnership between the 2 groups, but we need more of that in order to sway governments at the national level. The third part is now the member states. So there are 193 member states in the UN Assembly. Ultimately, they have the vote on whether to go for a convention or otherwise. And over the years, there's been around, like, you know, ebb and flow, about 50 member states that's in support. So right now we're still in the minority, right? 50 out of 193. So what happened since 2022 is that 20 countries, 20 member state representatives came together and formed a core group so that they can find ways to how to accelerate this work, because it has been 13 years. So our work in the NGOs is to figure out how to work with these friendly 20 member states in a constructive way toward our common goal. Now, when we kind of fast forward to particularly what happened this year in New York in April, it was quite pivotal for a number of reasons. So before the actual session, there was a global rally, which Dr. Lee highlighted earlier. The global rally was conceptualized as a place where a moment in time, a day, or in 2023, we made it a week, where advocates would raise our voices together. And advocates could be an NGO, an NHRI, and it was really quite spectacular this year, because we had social media reach that's 2.8 million. This more than double what happened in 2022. So that's a very clear indicator that more people are watching and participating, right? So that's really positive for the movement. We had even more diverse activities. There were virtual workshops. There were street marches. If you kind of type in Age of Rights, the hashtag, into Twitter, you would see photos of older people, younger people together, like marching down the street with big banners saying, we want the Age of Rights and we want a UN convention. And then there were multi-stakeholder meetings. So certain groups took the tactic of sitting down together with the governments and having that conversation before OEWG to advocate for support at OEWG for the convention. So that's kind of beforehand, leading up to, that was in March, leading up to April. During April, there were, from the NGO and NHRI, we know that we need to do the kind of business as usual. We need to advocate, make interventions on the floor. We would have side events where we would invite member states come in to participate, and we'll discuss and dialogue. We'll have advocates who sits on the panel and make presentations and kind of try to bring the evidence, the everyday life evidence to the table. Yet we know we need to do something a little bit different. And so what we decided to do is to coordinate our messages of what we say. So meaning that the NGOs who were there, as well as NHRI and our good partner from the Korean NHRI was there, we kind of huddled together and we said, okay, in addition to what we want to say from our country, regional, organizational perspective about human rights and the convention, what else we want to say? So we decided to focus in on the intersessional proposal to do intersessional work, and we crafted very clear messages of what we want. We want the member states to support intersessional work. We want to make sure that civil society and NHRIs is engaged in that work, and that we have an opportunity to contribute and ask questions and so forth. So we crafted these key messages so that, regardless of who is in the room making an intervention, we would say the same thing. And because of the fact that we say these same messages over and over again, we did get the feedback that member state is hearing us go, wow, this is like collective action, right? Talking about being together, like we are together. And I think some of that really helped to move forward the decision, the proposal to have an intersessional session. Because when you and I think about it, well, it's pretty well, quite straightforward, right? You have an issue, an opportunity to tackle something, then why not do something between like this year and next year? Yet member states have different considerations. They might say, well, I don't know, we're doing this work already once a year. Why do we want to do it again, like through a time period like this? Or some might say, well, I have a lot of other priorities already. Or some might say, my existing laws within my country already protect the human rights of older people. So I really, do I really want to spend the time to do this? Because it's intersessional work, we're asking member state to be part of that, right? So anyway, so it was quite uncertain as we kind of got into the week whether or not there would be support for that from the 193 member states. So then with that, we then actually advocated a lot. And then the outcome was that because of part of it is our advocacy, and part of it is that core group I talked about before, the 20 member states who came together, they were also very persistent with their member state friends and to say colleagues to say, we need to do this. So it's from that we actually got the we got the opportunity to do the intersessional work. So now, kind of reflecting and thinking about this, the opportunity ahead of us in these coming weeks is really to focus in on the intersessional work, because it influences not only what happened next year, which is potentially, we don't know whether or not it will be the last session of the OEWG, but also the discussion that's happening at human rights councils. So I think maybe I'll just stop there, because I think I've been chatting quite a bit, and then I'll turn it over to yourself so that we can just have a good dialogue about things. Thank you.
Oh, great. So your point is that we are in a very, very much important critical point in the history of all these efforts. Well, good. Do you have, well, now we start to discuss. Many people will have questions or something to make it clear. Who?
I have a question about what you have mentioned lastly, and you said that over the several months from today, from this year to
Next year.
next year is very important. And I know that you did not mention here, but I know that the open-ended working group on aging it decided to appoint 2 co-facilitators to investigate or to have meeting with not formal but informal meeting with the government and other national human rights institutes and the related UN agencies, and find what gap between the existing international framework and the in reality of the member states, and to have recommendation next year what the gap between the existing and the UN regulation and between the present situation. And that is, I think it is more important, and the further development of open-ended working group on aging and so far. So I'm not clear what this means, that the gap, the existing international framework of human rights and older person, how best to address them. It's over past 13 years and many times, and reiterated. It's clear that the human rights of the UN Human Rights Commission also confirmed that already many times. And then next year, and these co-facilitators report will be a good, an opportunity to forward new international convention on human rights of the person. I think this might be a draft framework of a new convention on the human rights of the older person. I think I really promisingly expect to be that further, development to, make real convention that we hope. And what do you think of this kind of report expected to be next year?
Okay. Thank you so much, first off, for a great summary about what's happening with the intersessional work, Professor Choi, and for hitting it on the mark with some very blunt questions too. In my view, I'll say my personal view, because I'm not speaking on behalf of Garrett when I say the next little bit about my thoughts about the exercise. The questionnaire, it's really, to me, an opportunity to really try to persuade those countries that is saying, I don't know, I don't think so, or maybe so. Because what happened is, to your point, there's been 13 years of discussion, and yet there has been no formal acknowledgement by member states that there are gaps. It's a little bit different from the Human Rights Council, right? Where the Human Rights Councils, there's existing covenants and international treaties. If something goes wrong, you pull out that treaty and then you can kind of point to it. There's not been that acknowledgement. So I would think that the purpose from a co-facilitator perspective is to facilitate acknowledgement from member states. And then for that, therefore, to have options of recommendations be developed. So I think that's the exercise from the co-facilitator and a core group perspective. For me, from the NGO perspective, there's a couple of things. So one is we can, like the questionnaire, once again, it has I think 5 questions. The first one talks about the different areas and what normative gaps. We can write about those gaps again. But the core is to approach it maybe a little bit differently. And I think the opportunity is to look at intersectionality. So let's say a woman's group. in that under those circumstances, what are the older women's human rights protection gap? And then it doesn't have to be a big piece of paper or a deep research, but enough of it to say that there's a gap and we want a convention. Because we really need to hone in and keep sending in responses that says we want a convention. Because what the options might look like, it might be, oh, let's not do conventions. The option might be to do protocols, right? Meaning the existing, let's say the CEDAW, right? Existing, add another protocol about older women. But we know that that doesn't work because older people is embedded everywhere, so we can't do protocol for everything, right? So, and then some might say, well, we don't really need to do anything. We just need to mainstream human rights. But we know that doesn't work because currently that's not being done well. And even with the MIPA review, the Madrid International Plan of Aging review, a global review recently, member states or a representative from 4 of the regional commissions said that implementation needs the support of a new instrument, human rights instrument. And so then someone say option, a protocol, we say no. Then they might say, okay, then let's do a declaration, right? They can always do that as an option. And then we know that with a declaration, it's different from a convention, because a convention, there will be monitoring, there will be follow-up, and so forth. But with the indigenous community, that's what happened in the early 2000s. It's a declaration. And right now, with all the implementation that's happening, we have advocates from that community that's saying, no, we actually need a convention, not a declaration. So I think to your point, well, to us as individuals who advocate for the older persons and it's into the work and understand some of this, we see it as a very straightforward formula, right? We know the gaps, why don't we just do a convention? But this whole exercise is to surface these gaps and then have acknowledgement of them by the member states and to make the recommendation, or maybe even the argument, like when we respond to the questionnaire, it is, why not? We don't want a protocol. And together with that, it's really getting, to me, like more voices saying that. Beyond the folks who can attend New York in person, beyond the global rally, it's getting more and more voices saying that. And then having those responses all going into the co-facilitators so that it looks like this. And from different countries. Okay, that's
Good.
kind of, thank you. That's kind of my thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, the importance of questionnaire itself is quite understandable. But how many countries, how many member states will join or will respond with the questionnaires? I mean, like the gap reports.
So that is really part of the advocacy work that we need to do, because what happened is, so we cannot we can voice our desire for our member state to actually complete the questionnaire, but we cannot determine how many would. So that's part of the advocacy work, and so it's very similar to us advocating for member state to be present at OEWG, right?
That's right.
The more we advocate, the louder we are, the more will happen.
By the way, before President Cho Hyun-se raised the questions, I will ask a simple question. You said the 20 core member groups, the core member group countries. Is there any Asian countries there?
Oh, I do not believe so.
Maybe.
It's mostly Latin American countries, some European. I would say I can scroll quickly, but when I last counted, I do. Oh, no, sorry, I stand corrected. Philippines.
Philippines,
how can I forget my good friend at the Philippines NHRI?
Okay, all right. Thank you. Far way to go.
May I?
Sure.
Something, yeah. Thanks for your presentation. I think the UN OEWG is at the center of discussion on human rights of all the people. And I know that there are many activities internationally targeting OEWG to strengthen the level of protection of the rights of all the people. But actually, in my case, it is not easy to understand the details because I'm not directly involved in the international activity, and it is not easy to go to New York to see and meet the people and to communicate and to educate the member states or others. But there are many peoples like you go to the New York and then do some activities, more important activities. But we didn't know. I didn't know that what did you do at the UN? But it is very good opportunity for me to understand your activities and I understand that at this time, as you mentioned, that as you explained to us, the important decision made at the 13th OEWG is the Intersessional Work, and then they nominate 2 co-facilitators. They have to report to the UN negotiated recommendations to the UN. I mean, the next session. I think this is very very positive progress. Over the last 13 years at the OEWG, they talking only. But this is one concrete progress, I think. This is my question. After this the progress, I mean the co-facilitator send the negotiated recommendation to the 13th OEWG. What kind of changes can you expect? This is very simple, but it's very important because we might know our goal. What should we do to prepare this, the questionnaires and recommendations to do some activity for them? What do you expect the changes? This is my question.
So then it's actually a little bit up in the air. I think in this way. So with the intersessional work, aside from the questionnaire, there are 3 briefings that happens. So it means the first one was by the OHCHR UN treaty bodies, as well as the independent expert. So they provided their views, right, on the situation and what they think are the gaps and what they think might be the next steps. What's to come next, and this happened in July, what's to come next is in September, where it will be UNDESA, OHCHR, like more the UN, the other system will actually make presentations. Yeah, that's September. And then in November, about a week or so before the closing of the questionnaire submission, it will be civil society and NHRIs. So there's a number of discussion that happened in terms of that timeline, and then we were, as both kind of NGOs and NHRs, are providing our feedback. The reason why we're going last is because we need to kind of observe to see what is the commentaries being made in the other sessions, so that we can prepare our advocacy messages or our questions and thoughts, right? And to try to help influence even more the recommendations. And then what we're hoping is that throughout this summer, between like August and then up to November, is to get all those questionnaires and a lot of activities happening at the regional and national level. So let's say at that point, there's a set of gaps, and they say, maybe the member states in the General Assembly say, okay, we acknowledge the gaps. Then it really depends on what gets negotiated as the recommendations in terms of options, right? Because one of the options might be, okay, start to put together a mechanism to draft a convention. Another one might be, they wouldn't say draft a convention, because convention is what we want, to draft an international legal instrument, and we'll advocate for convention. Another one might be, okay, we want to move this work to the Human Rights Council. We really don't know what options and the recommendations might come up until more into it later, end of November and December, when it gets negotiated. And then to your good point, Mr. Cho, we can kind of figure out, okay, based on that, how do we then prepare? And then hopefully, what some of us are trying to do is stay closer to the process so that we can help get the messages out, so that we will be kind of syncing with what's happening with the bigger picture, so that we can work on it together. Yeah, so, yeah. And then, I just want to comment the other good point you make about being in New York. It's actually not a big group there are not many people who can afford the time or the dollars to go to New York and spend a week, right? For the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, they sponsor 3 older advocates in 2023 to be present, so that they can actually advocate for themselves, and that's very rare, right? But the rest of us, it is a challenge dollar-wise. But I think what it is while that core session is important, a lot of it is national advocacy. It's me going to talk to my government in Canada and saying, talking to my national human rights colleague, come on, we have great human rights code, but what about other aspects where it's not covered by the covenants, right? So the national advocacy piece is what's really going to sway governments. In that international forum, it's more politics between countries.
Good.
May I ask one more?
Sure, of course.
I think this intersectional work is the work which is very concrete work, and then we can expect some options, like as you mentioned, because some governments support the convention and others do not support the convention. I think this negotiated recommendation will be an opportunity for them, for the countries, the government, to express their opinion officially, whether they support the convention or not, directly or indirectly. So, as we mentioned, only 50 countries support officially this new convention, and the others, some are silent and some they say no. Korean government, they didn't say anything, as I know, at the OEWG, whether they support or not. That means they do not interest on this issue, or they do not agree. So we have to be prepared to the outcome of this intersessional work. We have only 50 votes, only 50. In that sense, it is very important for us to advocate this issue at the national level. But it is not easy. It's not easy for Korean case. you couldn't find the right department, I mean the right person
Mm.
who we educate directly, because there is no department in charge of this, the international work, especially for the older people, the convention. So what we are doing in Korea as so far is to discuss a lot with NGOs and HRIS and experts only. So this is my question. What is the consideration or the factors we have to consider to approach the governments at the national level?
So you're right, because in a sense, different countries are structured differently where the concern and the welfare of older people sits, right? Some is under the Department of Family. Some are more fortunate to have a department on aging. In our case, we have a minister on seniors in Canada. So there seemed to be a more clear kind of contact point. But then within that, I think there's also the issue of other considerations, like foreign relations, that kind of come into play. I think it's really, hopefully there is a department or a department in Korea that focus somewhat on aging and older person. It might not be an entire office, but that might be one of the starting point. Foreign ministry, we always say it's a good place to make connections, because foreign ministry is kind of attuned to the politics at the international level, right? And then kind of like what might be the opportunity. So I think a couple of those, and having that, if there is those touch points possible, having those type of dialogue, and it's great though to hear that that the advocacy at the NGO level is strong, but to your very good point is how do we get that to the government? Yeah, the Korean NHRI is quite as we know, did present a initial first draft, a zero draft. I think it was November 2022. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact year. I think there is some appetite to continue that work. So I think that might be something that's a good partnering opportunity. I'm not sure, but it's not straightforward, and it kind of varies by country, to your good point. Yeah.
That's right. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Already we know that it has been 13 years since the Openended working groups began to work. And during about 3 or 4 sessions or 5 sessions, and 2 major group was divided, and the other group, one is the developing country and the other is a developed country, including North European and North American country. And so far, I have observed that most of the developed countries are really hesitating to have a new convention on older person, and or against the new convention of the older person, while the developing country and mostly is consent for making a new convention at the UN level. But the big problem is how to solve the developing countries, positions, to change the position. And it means if we, make them to understand the real need of the, new convention, it might be facilitated in 2 years, I think. It will be partially facilitated in the future. But still, most of the advanced countries and developed countries are against on new convention. What do you think the main reason of not, agreeing with making new convention at the UN level of the advanced countries?
Okay, so I think there's two parts to that. So while it may be true that earlier on, developed country is at the table less, but based on what we see through COVID, and even within Canada, my good country, we were the worst of OECD country in terms of death of older people at long-term care homes. Like we ranked at the worst, and that got us really angry. Homelessness in Canada is rising. People over 60s are becoming homeless because of renovation, redevelopment, and rising costs of rent. That's not affordable. So I think there is that shift. So when I look at the core group country, Argentina, Austria, Bangladesh, Bosnia, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Germany, Italy, Montenegro, Philippines, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Turkey, UK.
Wow.
Is there? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. USA.
They changed.
And Uruguay. So then we see that within the core group, they might not be saying a convention. I don't know what people are saying within the core group countries, but they are moving to say, let's close the gap and do something about it, right? So that to me is more hopeful, right? And then when we look at the Human Rights Council, it's the same picture. So Human Rights Council, what's significant is that in 2022, there was a meeting at the Human Rights Council where it's a multi-stakeholder meeting, which is quite unique for Human Rights Council, once again, with NGOs, NHRIs, and member states. And then from the outcome of that discussion, again, I don't know why, 20 member states, not the exact same one, but 20 of them wrote a paper, a contribution that said, we want a UN convention. And once again, there are like, different developed versus developing countries. So I think there is that hope for me, anyways, to push hard this time before OEWG 14 and before Human Rights Council session. In terms of why member states might say no to your UN convention, I think the usual that we hear that might be the case, that because we don't interview a member state to say, why don't you support? But what we tend to hear is, okay, it means that now I have to do monitoring, right? I have to do monitoring with the convention. I do not, we have good enough human rights law, so we don't want it to abide by convention. And there are a couple of countries that have said that time and time again in international forum on human rights, that our human rights system is strong enough. We don't need another convention to bind what we do. But I think the biggest reason is that there's not enough loud noises saying that this is not acceptable. And there's not enough loud noises from older people themselves saying it's not acceptable. The reason why I say that is when we think back to the women's movement, right? When CEDAW came to being, like women were marching the street, younger women, older women, saying equality between men and women and so forth, right? CEDAW came into being. With the Disability Convention, it was a group of, I think it was the shortest time frame in terms of getting a convention. I think it was less than 5 years, right? And it was a group of like people who have disability showing up in New York and saying, this is not acceptable to me. We need to fix it. So I think at the end of the day, and that's why I keep saying, well, it sounds like, it's all the work on us. In a way, the louder we can be, the more of us saying so, and especially older people, that's the only way to sway our government, right?
Right, yes.
In some cases, in most of the cases, I'm not
Voice.
talking about any authoritarian governments that, just say, everybody quiet. I'm not talking about that type of government. But anyway, so to me, it's still how loud we raise our voice. Yeah.
It's really great, you Margaret. We need a voice. We need a leadership.
Yeah, we're all leaders. Like we all like make it, we have all so much to bring to the table that if we work together. Yeah.
Is there any efforts to expand the membership of the OEGWA?
I think, okay, so it's always open for organizations who want to get accredited, right? There's no in term. Oh, are you talking about NGO membership?
No, states.
Oh, so the states is always 193. So it's based on the General Assembly. So when you say expand,
yes, but the only 50 participates in the OEWGA.
Oh no, sorry. What I said earlier is that that 50 through time have like around 50 say yes, they support a convention. Yeah. And then sometimes, go ahead.
How many of them participated at this 13th session?
This time around,
I mean the state, number of state.
Oh, I don't have the count with me, but this time around, I took a picture, and it was pretty full. About 80% full in the seats, but what happened is it's not that they're there every day on all the sessions. Because in the opening day, they make the position, right? And then they will come back. Some of them will come back to participate in the panel discussions in day 2 and 3, and then almost all of them come back on the last day, because that's where decision need to be made on any resolution and a discussion on the way forward. So the participation is much better than last year.
Oh, is that right? That's good. Good sign.
Yeah. So it's improving. Yeah, it's improving. Yeah.
I think the number. I think the number of the participating state is decreasing, and recently I don't know what the COVID pandemic is excusable reason, but recently, and the number of the states participating Openended working group are decreasing, and up to almost 38 or 40 group. And the first time I remember that almost 70 or more, it decreased.
Yeah.
I'm worried about this. What is this? It's trend.
Yeah, I think through COVID, for sure, there was a decrease because it was all virtual and it was hard to tell who's there, who's not. I remember there was quite a disappointment on the last day in 2021. We were all participating virtually. And then the last session was member states. It was close to member states' participation because they needed to talk about the way forward. So us NGO sign off, and then I remember signing off and getting ready to go out. And the next thing you know, I see on my phone messages saying, "Oh no, how come there's not even enough member states to make a quorum?" So then that got us really going in terms of advocating hard to make sure member states attend. So that's why if we, members of GARA would receive the template letters that we normally recommend if the members wish to use to advocate with the government to attend. And then we have been, I think, seeing the attendance go back up. Like I said, I don't have the exact count, but I remember the first day sitting there and I did a photo. I was happy. See the seats being filled. Sorry.
And I think, as President Cho has mentioned, the jobs of the co-facilitators from now on to until the end of this year, this might be quite important. And do they have any sort of outline for their activities from now on, so that maybe the countries like Korea can contribute to that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is an outline. They have sent some outline of the briefing sessions, who will be participating, and as well as a questionnaire. So kindly go to the website of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People. The organization has actually put together a web page that provides the latest updates on the intersessional work. The July briefing that happened, there was a recap of the notes of the discussion, like some key highlights, not line by line, but I think a pretty good recap.
July briefing? You mean it's over?
Yeah, it was over. Yeah,
Oh,
July.
okay.
Yeah,
so there is a document there.
Yes, there's a document there. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
yeah, so www.rightsofolderpeople.org, and then under UN processes, the first one is intersessional work. So that will kind of provide some good context of why the work, which Dr. Cho has already kindly kind of given an overview, and we all know. But yeah, and then some of the discussion has happened. I think in our meeting, in the meeting with some of our members, there's a desire that perhaps if the Global Alliance can look at some support and tools around the questionnaire, that'd be helpful. So I think that's something that's being discussed. So if you kind of take a look at that page, there'll be some updates on that as they come forward. And I think it would be fabulous if we can have organizations in Korea, like helping to input into that questionnaire.
Right. Yeah, about the questionnaire, I think this is a very good opportunity for us to express our opinion officially through the responding to the questionnaire. I don't think Korean government will make a response documents about the questionnaire. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Actually, as I know, the co-facilitators send a questionnaire to those stakeholders, including the states and NGO and NHRIs. But I didn't receive any letter from the co-facilitators. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They may send the questionnaire to the stakeholders. I hope Korean government will prepare it, but I don't think they will prepare it. But in Korea, I think it is necessary for NGO or NHRIs should prepare the response documents, answering the questionnaires. But there are some challenges that there are many experts in Korea who are experts on aging issue. So many professionals and experts, but it's not easy to find the person who are experts on human rights framework and interest in the aging issue. So that's the challenge. So in order to prepare the response documents to the questionnaire, what kind of things we may need to consider? Would you give us some tips?
So once again, this is personal because we haven't I'm not quite sure all the details yet in terms of what will be the support tools and resources coming from the Global Alliance. But so if we think about the first part, it's the first question asks about the topics again, right? The 14 topics. And the key is what's normative gap. So if I respond to it, I would say, I'll pick one of those, one or two or three of those, whatever topics, and say that, for example, I am an older woman. I work with older women, And what we see is that there is inequities and violation of my human rights in the area of healthcare, adequate standard of living, and the third one. And then to then give a little bit of evidence. Like, I don't think it need to be a whole entire research, because you have a lot of research already. Pull the most, salient data that you already have about older women, or whatever the topic you choose in those issues. And they say that therefore it's clear that the right to health is denied, that there's not protection for that, right? Or the right to adequate housing, whatever it might be. So that the first one really is clear about saying what the gaps are about the human right. Because I think some of the things that we could have done better over the 13 years, and even in our day-to-day advocacy, is to your point about just linking it to human rights, like in terms of the policies, because we have policies, but then we then have to say this human right is violated. We don't have to be an expert on human rights. And then the next set of questions get a little bit harder, and then it talks about how does the countries themselves participate in the UN system, periodic review, and the international systems, right? So I think that's where, if we reach out to our NHRI partners, and you have such great partners in Korea, to say, in Korea, we want to do this with the NGOs. We think we have like the stuff we want to say, and we can help within part one. When it comes to this thing about like how does Korea government interact with the periodic review process, right? Because that's one of the examples. Tell me, like, what is the effective way to express that? What is it? Because really, when we think about NGOs or me, like, I never really got into like the Human Rights Council processes or understand them or follow them until I got into this work. And it's not a normal thing, as you say. So therefore, I would lean in on our NHRI partners, and if there are some human rights lawyer who is very keen on the topic, or then ask them, like, so that this way, I think it's to make the exercise as least onerous as possible, so that it doesn't become a big project, but then it's a package in a way so that you can get multiple NGOs responding, right? One can talk about topic A, one can talk about topic B, there's no topic C. And at the end, it's always saying, therefore, because of the gaps that we see here in our country, and because OHCHR already published a report that says we need a new instrument, we want a UN convention, like something that's very kind of straightforward, and send that in. I think that would be what I think would be helpful. And I'm sure that as the team at the global GARUP kind of start developing some of the resources, there will be more ideas. But I think to me, it's not an exercise of being perfect or having a lot of research. Is to pull what we have and get multiple people or multiple organizations completing it and sending it out. Sending it back. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why the Korean government is not much interested in the International Convention on the right of the older person is that the Ministry of Health and Welfare is really in charge of the older persons matters. But we have the law, the elderly welfare law. It was enacted in 40 years ago. But the regulation on the law has only mentioning the elder abuse as a main focus of the human rights of the older person. And so far, many practice and the social institution and the care institution are much interested on, much focused on the elder abuse itself. But because of that, the government officials and many other persons working on the elderly institution, and some of the people are interested in the welfare of the elderly, in the people is that they do not really understand the framework of human right of all the person, the big meaning of the basic meaning. So if we solve the elder abuse problem, it might be the right of the older person will be improved. But in a sense, it's okay. But right, I'm agree. But and at the level of this our country's development and the social development, but I think it is too low. They are conscious about the human right of the older person. That is one of the big problem why the Korean government and the general people are not interested in the human right of the older person in general.
Well,
Yeah.
with regard to that point,
This is my observation. Yeah.
yes, that's right. Yeah, you are right. You're quite right. So that's why the AGAC has been involved in preparing for the basic law for basic law for the rights of older persons. We call it the basic law, 노인인권기본법, 혹은 노인인권법, which means we need the right-based approach in the legal frames, so that which could incorporate the oldest values of independence. You might be invited to this discussion too. So that's one thing we have to, domestically within the country, we have to do this first. And also we like to have support from the international convention too, which might be very helpful to improve the human rights of the older persons. We have a good experience of women's rights. So, well, that's the point which I wanted to add. And Hye-Kyung, do you have any comments as representing the AGAC, who have been involved in all this process?
Well, thank you very much for, of course, the Margaret Young's participation or agreeing to be the part of this meeting. And also I had already listened to active discussion, and already a lot of topics were covered. But I have one small question, maybe a big question, I don't know, depending on how you look at it. But I think it seems to me that there are different perspectives on this, the member states' approach or the attitude or the stance to UN Convention. You said that 50 countries are now in agreement with that. But some people say that some propose a very optimistic perspective that many countries will join. And some people say that there will be no way that we will see convention being adopted within the next 10, 15 years. It will be not really possible within the near future, So I just wonder your own opinion on that two different conflicting perspectives. How likely is more member states to join or accept or agree to adopt the UN Convention? So that's my first question. And one question, and the other, I mean, as I've just given a chance, but the second question is, what would happen after we cover all these topics in OEWG sessions next year? So what would be following step? What is the most likely event or outcome after next year, in your opinion? Thank you.
Yeah. I think after the topics are covered, it depends a little bit on I think quite a bit on what happens at the Human Rights Council this year in September, truthfully, because with the multi-stakeholder meeting that I mentioned about in 2022, what the hope was that coming out from that there will be enough support and pressure for the Human Rights Council, which consists of 47 member states, to actually support to start drafting a convention. So we haven't seen that happen yet. So that's why this intersessional work, as we complete the questionnaires or do other activities is so important because it also influence what happens at the Human Rights Council, right? So if, let's say, if there is a agreement at the Human Rights Council resolution, if the resolution is being put forward to say, let's start drafting, and then there's an adoption of that, then very naturally for the OEWG work, the recommendation to start drafting will be taken on more weight as one of the options, right? So then if that's the path, then what happens is the General Assembly presentation discussion next year, OEWG, might very well move in a very positive direction to say, let's look at mechanism to start drafting something. Then our work would be to say how to make sure it's drafting a convention and not a protocol or a declaration, right? So I think, so then, and that also determine what happens with OEWGA, because if it gets to the point where there is drafting of recommendations, and I am not UN, right? I'm not UNDESA, but if they say, oh, if we're going to start drafting, then why do we need to continue with the open-ended working group? Because the mandate is to identify gaps and to consider what options and make recommendation. So if fulfill the mandate, what is the purpose, right? So unless along the way over these months something else happened that requires this mandate to continue, then OEWG will continue and then have maybe different activities. So I think that's kind of like some of the unknown, and that's why I would say to anybody who listened to me, please like participate in the questionnaire and the briefing, because the briefing, even the very first one, there was a briefing back in June with only civil societies and the co-facilitators. In that briefing, I think we had 140, 150 organizations showed up, and the co-facilitator was so impressed that many civil society and NHRI showed up. So by us, even though we don't, because the exercise is to let member state kind of digest what presenters say at the briefing, right? And to pose question. Just by us being present and having our name of our organization in the chat box title and showing we're our NGOs, that's a very powerful message. So that's why this whole interim period is so important to us.
Good.
I hope I answered some of your question, Hye-Kyung.
Yes, that's very good point that I want to know. I did also join the July the meeting. I didn't say anything about the meeting, but you say that just registration and the staying there is also a voice of ours. Yeah. So that's good point. So it is better to share these events, the date, and how to approach to more people. Then that's better.
Yes. So right now, how it's set up is that UNDESA sends it to all the NGOs that are accredited to OEWG, and I think maybe all the NGOs that are part of ECOSOC status, because they don't have a database otherwise. So then what we try to do then is to because the Global Alliance have its 400 members, and we put everything on the public website. So we hope that the messages can get out to more members and non-members to participate, just like the global rally is not only for members but non-members, because our key goal is to at the Global Alliance is to support the movement and to get more voices in. So
yes,
hopefully,
yeah, right. Yeah. That's very important. We are not Happy to Korea is not accredited to the organization, but we could get the invitation from Happy International and from Garo, so I could join that meeting. So that's very important activity that you have to do in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's just also like once you get it, we can help send it to your network. That would be great.
I have I don't know how much times we have to go, but
almost.
I have one comment about the new convention. If we would the UN make a new convention in the future. But some of the member states or many NGO groups want to make the new convention very comprehensive in terms of items of human rights or the range of the human rights. And it might be desirable, but the more comprehensive the convention in terms of range of right items, and I think what I am really worried about is that if the convention is finally enacted in UN level, and most of member states have to ratify that convention, and so that it may be the same effect of the their national law. But the very comprehensive convention on the right of the human right for all the person could be a very social burden to developing countries, even though they ratify the convention and they accept it, and in reality they might be a limitation on to practice what the law, international law required to guarantee the human right of all the person. But so we need to make it a very basic human right item, and some additional item that might be flexibly applied to the older person according to the social and economic development of the respective countries. I think this might be a more practical or more realistic approach of the developing international convention of the right. I don't know, but my feeling is that it's a kind of worry. It might be or not. It's my last comment.
I think it's a very good cautionary, because if we make it too complex, because if we make it too complex, it's not going to get ratified, or it's going to get harder to get ratified, let alone implement. And when we think about it, this instrument, it's about the older person as much as it's about longevity and human rights in the later life, right? And we keep evolving as a human race, because who would think right to work is now a need more than a nice to do in older age, right? And then I don't know, when my nieces and nephew grow up to be 100, what they will face, right? So that we cannot foresee how we evolve as a human race, and we're to support that life course approach. To your good point, the effective but less complex it would be a good spot to aim for. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, well, we had a very intensive talk. It's not a simple topic. It's really yes. Maybe strategically, Professor Choi's recommendation could be bought by some maybe larger person, but well, I don't know whether the compromise is the only strategy for us. Okay. Well, that's a round table, which was really the Margaret Young sort of seminar. It's very, very, very informative, and we had learned a lot. And well, lastly, why don't we have a last comment from the Margaret, and then we will close the round table.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I really thank the opportunity for today, because I think every time when I have these conversations, it reminds me what is important, right? It brings new ideas. So, and I'm really hopeful that because you yourselves are in the front line there, in the trenches together,
Right.
that will make a difference. So I think
Okay.
really reach out anytime if I can be of help,
Mm.
and then we'll continue the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your enthusiasm. We will respond with our best. We'll do our best to contribute to all this process. And thank you very much for our Professor Che, as well as the President Cho, who are the invaluable asset for our agency, our center. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.